line at CCL. The reason for that increase is twofold. We've started to use more storage in that environment as we start to digitise more and more of our documentation. But the costs are also related to us increasing our remote access capability that we did through the COVID. So we've got actually more infrastructure in there to allow that to happen. Microsoft licensing has changed as well. Two reasons for that. We've just got more people now accessing the Microsoft product set. And the other main reason is that we're moving to a product, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, Microsoft Teams, which will now become our telephony environment. So it will use for our internal and external video and voice calls. The other movement was Trapeze, which is a solution that's used predominantly by our building unit, but our planning team are going to start using it as well. Now, we bought that on a per user basis, but with the increase in numbers, it was made more sense to go to a site license. So the increase is moving from that user base to site license. In terms of staffing, we're retaining a security specialist at the moment, and that security specialist is there for two reasons. We've got an extensive cyber security programme which will elevate the level of our maturity here at the council, and they're also covering for a member of staff who's on a long-term sabbatical as well. So that's going to have an impact next year with us. Now, you may ask why I'm showing the projects when there's no actual change to budget. We've actually managed to keep to that, but there has been an impact. So what we've actually done is we've looked at a programme of work, and we've actually elongated some of our projects, so we've phased them out so that they run over a longer period. But in some cases, we've actually moved them into later years. So, for example, we were going to have a look at contract management. We were going to review our document management system TRIM, but we've pushed these things out to 22-23. So in the commentary there was just a list of projects, and I thought it would be useful for you just to understand a little bit more about some of these key projects. Our e-services programme, it continues to digitise some of our internal forms for our staff, but some of our external forms for the community. And we're taking the opportunity when we can to automate some of the processes around that. So a good example of that is now our online booking capability for all the council facilities, where it's one touch, you go in, you book, you pay, and it's reserved for you. Interestingly, we're doing a little pilot with our friends in community and recreations around sensors to look at how we might be utilising one of our parks and get some information around that. We continue to develop our asset management and information system to capture more and more of our key council assets. We are certainly looking at things like Office 365, which gives Word and Excel and our PowerPoint, but in a cloud format. And we still continue to move on the GIS front, enabling more and more location-based information as well. I just thought I'd mention a couple of things that will probably continue to impact on the budget areas within IT. And you may have heard of software as a service or cloud. Whether we like it or not, the vendors of solutions now are moving more and more to offering their products only in the cloud. And that fundamentally changes the way we procure things, because we're buying a service and no longer buying physical assets. So we need to keep an eye on that and manage that well. And the other thing that we unfortunately have to live with is cyber security. More and more we've seen hackers hacking organisations just because they can, as well as obviously for financial or political gain as well. So we need to keep mindful of trying to reduce the probability of attack, but we also have to understand how we would minimise impact. And if you look at some of the researchers, it will say when we're attacked, not if we're attacked. So we've got to be able to and capable of doing that. The little graphic there, sorry, it's a small graphic, but if you look at the blue bars, that's indicating the number of cyber incidents that were reported through CERT-NZ, an agency that helps organisations and businesses with cyber security. And that was for the first half of 2019, and the red bars are showing the corresponding same period for 2020. And they're saying that they've seen a 42% increase in the number of attacks that have been logged with them now. So it's there with us. I think it will always increase, and we've just got to be ready for that. So that's some of the key points. I'm more than happy now to answer any questions that you have with regards to the budget.
Thanks, Andy. That was really comprehensive, and appreciate the effort you put in there, so it's great. So, any questions from colleagues? It's pretty comprehensive. Kirsten, Councillor Barnett.
Hi Andy, how are you going? Just overall in your budgets, obviously you've had to prioritise the projects coming forward, but how much are going to benefit customer services in terms of the public, in terms of the front-facing IT solutions? And where are they sitting in the budget? What years?
Okay. We've had to strike a balance. There is some work that we need to do behind the scenes to make sure that we've got the right capabilities to deliver some of that. The key ones are probably around the Internet of Things that I mentioned briefly there, how we are actually going to start consuming an awful lot of that data to give us better insights into how our community are consuming our services, and what we might have to do either to improve them or adjust them on that basis. The e-services programme is predominantly helping in that community space as well. So other areas that we're looking at are things like dog licensing and how we can improve that whole experience for our community as well. So there are a number of things that are going on there. I think a lot of the things that we are looking at are indirectly will help. So the capture of assets with our new system is actually helping in the background the service that we're delivering around things like water break fixes, because we understand more about what's in the ground now as well, and we understand what we're going out to see. So these are the kind of things that are there. So I think everything has an impact probably on our community, but either in an indirect or direct way.
I think what also you'll see is the website redesign, and already we're doing quite a lot of stuff online at the moment, what customers are looking to do business with us, and that'll be a lot more easier to locate and use. So at the moment it's quite cumbersome trying to get through to the area you want to get through to, and I think some of the structure that I've seen Alistair working with at the moment will work quite well for us as well.
So in previous years we've talked about being able to log in and have your own account and do that. We haven't really promoted it because we haven't been ready with the back services. How is that developing? Because it seems to be taking a very long time to get to a reasonable level of service for the people who want to now do everything online and basically do everything on one of these.
I think we'll just have to continue to look at how we're delivering some of that through our web services. But you're right, our customers are starting to become more au fait with mobile applications. At the moment, one of my key objectives is to review the business improvement strategy, which has just come to its end of its first period. And we'll obviously be looking at that in terms of how we can digitally transform going forward some of these services that we are delivering. So it's certainly up there as a number one for me to have a look at that, and obviously coming out at the back of that will be a programme of activity to tackle that.
Great. Any other questions? Well, thanks, Andy.
No problem.
At the start of the meeting, we had a pro forma motion which included all the budget papers as they are. So unless there was any debate or other things colleagues wanted to amend, then the budgets will go through as in the draft budget as is presented. So thank you for all the preparation and work that you've done, and we look forward to working with you.
No problem. Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Sorry? No.
Is it not? Damn.
It was a good try, Andy, but yeah.
That's the property budget.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy.
No
Appreciate
problem.
that.
And if there's any questions that come up after the meeting, please
Thank you.
feel free to get
Appreciate
in
that.
touch. Yeah, okay, thank you.
So some of our template has it, and then people don't follow the template. So,
Yeah.
But on the whole, I think, as we said earlier, it's a big step up this year. So thanks, Andy.
Appreciate
We
it.
look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we now, you can remain there, Rob, if you like. Now get, sorry, not Rob, Jeff. We come to Rob, page 636 in the whites.
Good afternoon, Mr Mayor, councillors.
So Jeff, consider we've read this, so it's, Rob, sorry, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Pardon me. So we've read this, so just highlight the main points that you feel that we
Absolutely.
should know. Thank you.
Probably some of those key points are the housing rent review, deferred for 1 year as a result of government changes. You will recall that the July rent increase was put on hold as a result of COVID-19, and subsequent to that, legislation changed, meaning you could only do a rent review once every 12 months. So for a number of reasons, the better alignment to the annual income adjustment for pensioners and some additional financial support they get from the government in terms of heating subsidy, that all happens in sort of April, May, June sort of period. So there's some additional funds, and we feel that that's probably a better time to bring in a rent increase in July as opposed to November. There's certainly some additional administrative costs if you have your budget split in terms of both revenue expectations and the associated costs, etc. And so having it at the 1st of July makes a lot of sense from a process point of view. The step rent increase to now apply from years 2 to 4 with a 1 year extension, and that's intended to preserve our financial position over the 10-year horizon, so to return us to where we would otherwise be if we didn't have the impact of these changes. So that's probably a key one. Additional office accommodation in the form of Durham House has been allowed for over the next 10 years. The lease is for 3 years +1, but we anticipate likelihood of us extending that beyond that through to the anticipated extension of the office building in 2028, 29 and the following year. I'd just like to note that there's some uncertainty around the scale, the footprint and the nature of the office extension, and that's largely due to the Three Waters review and what the outcome of that will be. That will obviously have an effect. And also the scale, footprint and nature of both the library extension and the public amenity and car park space, as well as the potential for other activities on that site. And as you'll be aware, there's a steering group formed that's working their way through those considerations, and they are still in progress. There's some new provision in the budget in relation to the Kaiapoi mixed use business area to cover off on holding costs, and some anticipated expenditure on valuations and the like, where we do look at proposals for either leasing or for disposal within that. And there's an update report or reports coming to the February Council meeting covering off on progress on the 3 coastal campgrounds. Those probably cover off on the main points, but I'm very much open to any questions.
Thanks, Rob.
Just one point, with the increase of the housing for the elderly, what we normally do is we have to give them 3 months notice of that increase, and so we normally go out about the same time as we go out for consultation of the LTP and just give them a bit of advance warning. And what that does is sometimes we get a little bit of feedback through the consultation process not to increase them. So that's just what we normally do.
Councillor Atkinson.
Rob, just with the regeneration land that we've got there, or the mixed business use, you've got the rates in here. Where does the maintenance budget fit for that? Does that sit with you, or does that still sit with recreation?
No, that's it.
Because I'd like to know
yeah,
a holistic cost of what's it's actually costing in a holding cost.
sure. Yeah.
So who does that, or where does that sit?
That has come over to me to administer. There's I guess there's a logical question of in terms of the maintenance. Well, what is the maintenance? It's likely to be maintaining the grass and keeping it well kept and aligned. And while that's likely to be through the Delta contract, that doesn't necessarily mean to say that it has the asset ownership, titular asset ownership, needs to sit with Green Space or someone else. So the logic behind it is that given the commercial nature of it and the likely sale of the property, we're the preferred one to administer, but there are clearly a number of other stakeholders within council's administration. The business centres are a lead on that, and so we're really holding it in terms of the holding costs, rates and maintenance, and providing some support around the sale processes or leasing processes.
So where's the maintenance cost in the budget though?
That's covered within the allowance, so it's not a lot. At the moment, it's really allowing only for keeping the grass maintained.
So there lies my question. If it's just as a holding cost without maintenance, where is the maintenance cost?
So 645. So if you go to page 645, at the bottom of that page, you see mixed business use areas. There's an ops budget of 12,000 and a maintenance budget of 10,000.
Oh, I see. Oh, I missed that. Okay.
So
Thank you.
That's
what I wanted to know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sorry, okay.
Thank you. Rob, just a question. Social housing, where are we at with that review and process, please?
We have been doing some work in the background. It's not as progressed as I would have liked to have done,
please?
but we're looking at over the next 6 months bringing that back to council in terms of the strategic direction and where we might apply the funds from the proceeds of the
It's
sale of the 7 houses.
It's been a very long time, and I get asked about it constantly. Is there any way that can be any sooner than 6 months, please? Like within the next month or two?
We can certainly bring an update on the direction.
Chief, I'd appreciate if you could
Certainly.
work with Rob on that, because
Okay.
you get asked a lot of questions about it.
I should note this is not going to be my area from the 1st of February on. It'll be under Liz Smith.
Anyway,
Through
a
the restructure.
So, yeah.
But I'll keep an eye on it. When you talk about social housing, it rings a number of bells with me in terms of what that strategy looks like. We have housing for elderly. We don't have social housing, and so it's different niche markets that you're looking at. And even within housing for elderly, there's niche markets, such as the Aberleys, for instance. They look after Aberfields.
Yeah.
They look after a sort of a commune type housing for elderly, as opposed to the niche market we look at, and that's more your traditional blue collar worker, rented most of their lives, and we don't do the heavy touch social housing that come through your traditional housing corporation and so forth.
So through Greater Christchurch Partnership in particular, this is an issue that is gaining momentum, and both social and affordable housing and the council's role in, affordable housing has a number of components to it, as you'll be familiar from how do you get people into home ownership, through making development affordable, through people, is there adequacy in the rental market for the needs, and is there capability between the private sector, the NGO sector and the public sector to be able to deliver that, and what's the various roles, where's entities like Kāinga Ora who are now the main provider for social housing across New Zealand. In the greater Christchurch context, there's a fair challenge being put to us that this area and Selwyn should accept a greater share of the responsibility in supporting social and affordable housing across greater Christchurch and not leaving it solely to Christchurch or predominantly to Christchurch City. That's an interesting debate. I think there will also be a debate about the future ownership of elderly persons housing, whether that should remain in the council domain. Christchurch have put it into a trust with, initially the motives were, I think, around gaining access to funding, particularly government funding that previously wasn't available to local government. Interestingly, there is still, the whole housing issue clearly is one of the hot potatoes of New Zealand at the moment, and it's only going to get hotter with the way property prices are heading. So you're right to note that it is going to become a significant item on the agenda in this council, thinking about how it positions itself, how Greater Christchurch positions itself in the relationship between the public sector providers, NGO and private sector. What's the right balance and what role should we play is an issue that is in front of us right now.
Yeah, and Jim's absolutely right. I get asked by and the others of us on the Greater Christchurch Committee have been asked by Yanni and co. We've got our district plan that we've got to land with our partners, and it's a really key question. So we had a consultant come in well over 12 months ago that helped us pull information together. I really would like to see this sooner rather than later about what our some options for us to consider, because we've sold down most of the housing in Oxford Estate now. I've said this to the partners when we've talked about it, that we've got a plan coming and we'll be talking about it. We're still talking about it. So I'm just putting on record my disappointment that we haven't got something here already, and I'd like it sooner rather than later, please. Okay, so other questions? So I've got Councillor Barnett, Councillor Ward, Councillor Redmond.
Right, thank you for answering my questions, but I'm sorry, I still didn't understand one of them, so I'm just going to ask a little bit more. On page 650, with the pensioner housing budget, the very bottom line says closing balance, and from 20 all the way through, it's getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and there's no sign of improvement. How am I reading that wrong? Can you explain that? Because I thought it should at least be coming back at some point.
Yeah, it is coming back. You can see, and I'll point you to the operating surplus line. You can see that the operating surplus,
It's two up.
sort of on that page, the fourth green line up, operating surplus.
So it does start getting
comes
better.
into the black,
Yeah.
and it continues to go into the black. And what that means is you're actually covering your operating expenses. What we could do with this account is just take out a big loan and close that account off
Right.
with a loan, and then you'll see interest and principal come through as we do with most other accounts. With this one, it doesn't have any rate funding. It's purely funded by fees and charges. In year 17, it goes into the black and equity. Its equity goes into the black, and from there on, it builds up sufficient reserves to actually fully fund our ongoing capital replacements, renewals work.
Because when I looked at the capital surplus, that's getting worse and worse too.
Yeah.
So that didn't seem to line up.
We can provide one out to year 20 for you, and
Then
that
it does
will just extrapolate and show you that it does recover.
Thank
so
you.
we'll send that through.
If you imagine also that the line of the rent is going in a gradual increase, and we have a 10-year period where we are actively spending significant life cycle money on doing the upgrades. Once that capital expenditure stops, then the capital account actually then starts to go into the opposite direction and grow. And once it gets into the positive in 2037, and it grows substantially, and you are earning interest on that money as well. So there's an inflation hedge, which positions us to make it sustainable
quite nicely
over the
going
longer term.
forward. Thank you.
The other thing we haven't done this year is we haven't put in front of you the increase effects. And we try and work what that is, because sometimes when we put an increase in fees to the for housing for the elderly, they actually get more disposable income, because the accommodation supplement puts them in a different threshold. So we haven't done that this year, but we need to actually see what that is, because we know Councillor Barnett comes back and asks, is it affordable? So, yeah. But sometimes it gives $1 or $2 in their hand a week by putting the rent up. It's quite a strange situation.
And just subsequent to that, with all the new landlord regulations, are we meeting those standards? Because I know that some of those properties still, even though they've been upgraded, the standards are quite high now.
So there are certain parts of the standards or expectations around things like insulation. They're all squared away. And around asbestos management. That's part of the program of capital works, is working our way through addressing that. And when we come to those refurbishments, that also addresses the vast majority, if not all, of the healthy home standard expectations. There are parts of what are commonly referred to as healthy homes that are legislative, and parts of them are aspirational. So I think we need to understand subtly the difference. But there is also a subtle point whereby if there's an existing tenancy in play, then the standard for certain things doesn't apply. And that's not to say that we want to disadvantage existing tenants, but from a practical point of view of undertaking the refurbishments, if we were to do it on all of the units in one go to try and get them up to standard, you would put an awful lot of people in motels and at a considerable expense, so it's counterproductive. So as we get vacancies from people moving on or whatever, that's when we have the program of doing those refurbishments which address those things, and picks up on a new tenant coming in so that we're compliant when a new tenant starts. So that's the direction that we're working in with it.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you. Page 643, with service centre expenses and lease. Farmers lease says $280, $150. Durham Street 97,810. But I can't find where Percival Street or Junction Hotel, which are new leases, where they are proportioned as their expenses.
So they aren't allowed for in the LTP because we will be completing the refurbishment prior to prior to the new period coming into play. So our need for those spaces will go.
So
only Durham is the permanent one, the other two are true temporary.
Okay, so we haven't taken long-term leases on the Junction Hotel or Percival Street?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Redmond.
Thank you. One of my questions you've just answered, I wondered about the building unit in the Junction Hotel and the ESU in the Percival building. That Percival building is very handy. You can get your lunch downstairs and go upstairs. So never mind.
Sorry about your inconvenience.
They are sweltering today, though.
Right. My question was on page 637. The inability to have a rent increase for the elderly. It seems that the knock-on effect is a figure of $4 million by year 30, if that's carried forward.
Yeah. So if we didn't address it, the gap would be in the order of the gap between the existing rental flow and the adjustments, because incrementally every time if you make an adjustment this year, you've already made that for the subsequent years. So each annual adjustment on the step rent to get you to a sustainable level actually runs through for the 10, 9, 8, 7, etc. So it actually accumulates to quite a substantial sum.
So we missed out on one increase. Can we double up on the next increase?
The strategy we've used is to add an extra year to it. We could do exactly as you say. What that does tend to do is steepen the rent increase, and when you allow for the net impact on not all tenants, and Jeff makes a good point that some tenants ironically are almost better off with rent increases, which seems perverse, but for many of them there is 30% of the rent increase they carry themselves, and 70% is covered by the increase in the accommodation supplement. So if we concertina that, then there's a more significant jump. So this is spreading it, which one view is that is a more gentle and less of a negative impact on people adjusting to the change. It is a moot point because we certainly could do it, as you say, to increase in the 3-year step rent more, or do it the way that we've proposed here.
I think what we'll do is we will model it, and because I'm expecting an increase in the accommodation supplement, because with housing prices going up, the government will have to arrange an upward movement with not just the rates rebate but other things, particularly the rental housing accommodation supplement. So we'll have to model that and see how that looks. When we do put it up quite significantly, we have to go around and have special meetings with the elderly because they get quite upset about it. We have to actually explain to them, and we normally bring someone in from WINS to actually support that discussion, and we usually get a couple of councillors in as well. But we will model that and just see what it looks like, because it's probably we're probably going to get a win-win situation if that does happen.
Well, the rent freeze was a COVID sort of response, but yet the elderly are, and I'm classing myself in that, are the least affected because they will have a guaranteed income. Their income hasn't been impacted. But anyhow, I look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I say that those meetings that we've had in the past are extremely successful. The elderly actually really appreciate them. I sent through yesterday Snaps and Solve of the condition of Ranui Mews and the common gardens, hedges and so on that are actually, in my view, quite disgusting. And so from there I wandered round to Meadow Street to have a look, and the weeds around there are equally in the common gardens. Have we got in these budgets enough maintenance money? Because that prompted me to come back here this morning and look at these budgets and go, man, if that's mowing for 12 months and that's gardening for 12 months, they are extremely low. And I want to make sure, because believe me, my mother lives at Ranui Mews, and that was how I saw it in the first place. When those elderly are sitting in their chair in their veranda looking at weeds, that becomes the biggest problem that will cause them a heart attack in the next 24 hours that you've ever seen. And believe me, when I go in there, I get accosted by, I think there's 19 units in there, I get accosted by 15 of them, because the other 4 are in hospital, saying, look at the condition of these. Now, the reason I ask this is it would appear to me on value that there is not enough maintenance money in here to do the gardening at these units. They are ours, and we need to be looking after the elderly, and we need to make sure that it is adequate, in my view. And it just appears to me there's not enough money in there, Rob. Can you, I mean, you will have assessed it, I know, but can you give me some assurance that it is there? It is enough.
Right. Some of the contracts that we did have in play around the garden maintenance have lapsed, and we have been working, initially we were working with Delta to look at tying in with their existing contract. They came back to us with quite a different price to what some of the others were signalling. So we've decided to take that out to an open procurement, and we're actually working through establishing the standards, because you're quite right, there are some areas where we feel that the contract has not necessarily served us as well. So I'm a bit concerned around some of your comments, because I hadn't had quite that level of feedback, and I will certainly follow up on that with Jean and also go and have a good look myself. But the detail and the specifications of the earlier contracts were not what I would call adequate to give us teeth to enforce. So that might be pointing to a cost issue, or it may be just around a performance aspect in relation to the contracts as such. So we're hoping that with the new contract form that we want to put in play, that will address the standard, and through a competitive process, we also hope to get a reasonable good price, but that will obviously evidence itself once we go through that. In the first instance, however, I certainly will follow up on those comments because I didn't get the sense that they were quite as bad as what you've described. So,
Well, look, thank you for that, but it would have been nice to have that indicated in here. I had no idea that there has been changes in level of service. But my second question to that is, so what do we do in the interim? They're like that now, so how do we get them up to spec right now, so that we can keep the maintenance up? Because my understanding is around there, and believe me, I do have a little insight on this, is that they're going in there mowing the lawns and not doing any edges, they're not doing any common gardens, because that's what they've been told to do. That's their story, not mine, is what I'm saying.
Sure. So, and look, I do need to go away and clarify some of those points with exactly where those contracts sit. So I'll do that investigation.
Thanks.
Any further questions? All right. Thanks, Rob. That's your budget. Unless there's any comments any colleagues wish to make. Thank you. All right. We now move. Not that James Palmer anywhere around. Here's management budget.
No, he's left the building.
Hey, going that way.
So we're at
Uncle Jimmy, did you say?
yes.
Sorry, Jim. Right.
I was going
Back
to
to the right
say
page.
yeah,
665.
yeah, I was going to say 666, this budget covers the chief executive and the EA support that is provided across the organisation. There was a little adjustment in this coming year's budget for presentations, which are long service leave, when Jenny went through and said how many are going to get long service leave at the end of this, long service presentations, and what goes with that. There's actually a bump, so she reflected what the reality is rather than running at a deficit. He would say that after his budgets are finished. Can we recall, please?
We can go back and have a look at it if you like.
So I'd be saying pretty much nothing to see in that budget. But happy to take any questions.
Any questions from colleagues? No. Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
Oh, Paul. Yep.
That's my code. That's my code name for the council.
All right.
In fact, just to be serious for a sec, that is actually one of the best value spends we do, and people who come along to things like the Mad Try later this week get to see the work of that team put together, and and they do some things which are fun across the organisation. So
just a comment on that, Jim. We used to get invited to that. We're not now. Is there a reason for that?
Not from my perspective, there's not. So you mean the Mad Try?
Yeah.
Well,
because we
you're
used
welcome.
to enter teams and stuff that have been for a while, but we haven't been actually sending
I suspect it's just. Yeah, I suspect it's just the email address has picked up an email address that's got staff on it. But
okay. We're not on the staff.
You're most welcome, and a late team would be could be registered from this point. And you could train tomorrow, and you'd be ready to go for Friday.
Used to do it.
Good.
No. Look, making a difference. Yes.
Oh, well, that's something we can look at for next year. It's not going to be enough
I did
time
see
to be at it
David
this year.
on his e-bike this morning, so he could probably do the bike lead for you.
Right.
Right,
Has he got
okay.
an e-bike now?
Well, yeah, they've
Oh,
both
that's
got,
right. They've both got one.
e-
Yeah.
no,
Philip's got an e-bike as well. It's never been
Anyway.
used, but yeah. All right. In all seriousness, let's keep moving.
Okay, so
All right.
so the last budget for your consideration,
yep.
and it's 670
70.
is close enough. So there is a significant increase in here, and I have mentioned this to you before about us employing a human resources manager, both to enable Liz to take some leadership in other parts of the business that I've talked to you about before, and really to give us capacity to deal with the number of challenges we're facing, both the growth of the organisation, the issues that manifest uncertainty and tension in our community and across our organisation, translate to a significant amount of work for our HR team, which are struggling to deal with that, let alone the other business they should be focused on. And the other element is there is just a whole lot more to come. So what happens in the reform proposals that are coming, helping the organisation through that significant. So that has been the reason for that increase in cost. Otherwise, it's been kept as tight or as close to last year as possible.
Okay. Any questions of Jim? Phil? Employee Assistance Program.
It is a great program. So Employee Assistance is through Workplace, and they do a number of things for us. Firstly, they used to be called industrial chaplains, but they're not that anymore. But Andy Edwards comes to our place, walks the floor, talks to people about issues. And that's hugely valuable because he builds relationships over time with staff, and when they have concerns, and we allow people, whether they're personal issues or work-related issues, we provide support. And at times, staff may need counselling, so we will provide a number of paid-for counselling sessions to support staff through difficult times. It might be health-related, family, trauma, work stress issues, work relationship issues. We provide that support, and they do it. They also help staff who are going through some difficult times, trying to work out where their place in life is and whether it's here or not, and they'll support them through that. So that's a really valuable part of the services we get and offer and support staff with, and it makes a huge difference.
That service is also available to elected members should they wish to
Absolutely
use it. So as I indicated through COVID, well, seriously it is. And Andy drops into my office from time to time. He sits down for a chat. He's a really lovely guy, and it's just nice to know that we have someone offering that pastoral support within our organisation, because sometimes you know, if you're going through something, you do need someone that's independent to have a talk to. And I can't speak for myself, I haven't used the service, but just in him sitting down and the way he deals with things, and certainly through Landa's passing last year too, he was great. Really good to someone to sit down and have a talk with. And he comes from a very caring background in his career. He's a lovely man, so we're really lucky to have him.
And they have wider counsellors that are available to support as well.
Paul?
The doubling of legal fees was more than double of it.
Yeah.
What's there? Gone from 8,100
And I think that's
to 18,300.
yeah, and that'll probably reflect a number of the issues that we have in front of us, where we need legal advice and support. The employment law field is I would only say getting more complicated. And I think that is just reflecting a reality of the level of fee that we actually have a really good HR lawyer. Penny Shaw is who's a independent operator, and she gives us really good service and advice. But you get some. You only need 2 or 3 times a year to get a challenging employment relations issue, and she's available to deal with those, but she also gives us quite a lot of other general advice and support. So yeah, that's the reflection of probably the level of business that we're doing, and probably anticipate to do, if I'm being honest.
So we're having a few legal problems with staff.
Look, in a business like ours, probably at any point in time we have 1 or 2 things going on at any one point in time. That's just the way it is. People, I would say people are more litigious these days too. They're more knowing of their rights and are prepared to, and that's not a bad thing, but it is just a fact of life. And when they turn up with a barrister or something like that for a performance review, sometimes, or a performance discussion or something like that, which happens, then sometimes we need matching support. Yeah.
I don't think we should go any further into that. We're in a public meeting, so got any specific questions, we could have that in the briefing at some stage. We just turn, Sandra, would you mind turning the microphone off down the end there? All right, any further questions? All right, so I think that's us done. Do you want to give us an indication?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, what else have we got to do? Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm meaning in terms of our pages.
Yeah,
Yes.
so the thing left to do
Thank
is make your resolution in adopting
Sorry.
those, and then... Yeah, we did that. Yep.
Chris did that earlier.
Chris did it on his own. And,
Yeah.
Something we should know about, Jeff.
I've gone through and ticked everything off from my side, and I think we've got everything done.
Yeah, we have done everything. So the decisions that have been made, subject to this resolution, have had some impact on the rate proposals that we were saying. So we were at 3934 and then some 42s. So with your decision yesterday around Enterprise North Canterbury, that was another 30,000. So that would take year 1 from 3.9 to 3.95. And today's decision around bringing forward the Ravenswood land provision of 2.5 million, bring that forward from 24-25 through to 21-22 will, if it's 21, is it 20? It was 21-22, so that'll actually have an effect from the 22-23 onwards. Okay, so you've probably got a the point 2 yeah, so there's a little bit, so we've probably got at least 2 3.95s, then a little bit of a blend and extend on the 4.2. So whether the 4.2, I'm not sure how, we'll just need to have a look at that. Do we say 20? 21, 22 would be 22. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, so I cropped that up. I was right the first time before I spoke. So it would be 3.95, 4.15, and then 4.2, 4.2, 4.2, 4.2 is what essentially the decisions that have been made to date. So 3.95, 4.15, 4.2, 4.2, 4.2, 4.2.
So we need a resolution to adopt and confirm all budget resolutions. So I'll move from the chair that we do so. Second, Councillor Doody. So just briefly speaking to that, I think we've had a really good couple of days. There's been really good discussion here. Thank you to our staff, because I really genuinely mean that our budget papers are the best I've seen in my time on council. There's a few things in there always is, but I think from last year particularly, this has been a dramatic improvement. And we were in lockdown last year too, so Sarah, the governance team, thank you for all the support that you've put into making sure that the papers were out to us early, so there was an opportunity for that to be considered. I think the process that you also put in place following some feedback from last year, that all colleagues that put in questions could see the answers in advance if they had time to do so. I appreciate that doesn't work for everyone, but it gave that ability to see what the questions were, because you may well have answered that yourself and asked that, or we're going to ask that, and it just takes up a lot of staff time not knowing who's asking, who's doing what. So I thought that process that you put in place was really good. To the we've got an LTP team at PCG, so Helene's part of that. Thanks Helene for being here. Joan's part of that as well. Jim and Jeff, superb advice as always. And I think we're landing in a responsible position to present to our community. So, and all our staff that have presented here, I think they've done superbly well, and commended them on that throughout the process, as have we all. To get through this in a couple of days, there's been a lot of previous work this last period of time. So, thank you all for your involvement in that, because it's actually, and given some positions on it, it's made this process, I'm not going to say straightforward, but more straightforward than it might have otherwise been. It's a big process doing a 10-year plan, and then we've got a lot of other consultations going on, so there's been a lot of work. So yeah, thank you team. I've enjoyed working with you over these last couple of days. Now the next part comes, which is getting out there amongst our community and letting them know about it, and there'll be engagement opportunities which the team, Alistair and the team, are working through how we might do what we've done in the past, which is supermarkets and others. So they'll be in touch with you about opportunities there. The CD document has been uploaded into the document resource centre there, so if you've got any comments on that, welcome that. Obviously there will be some revision in there based on our discussion here, but on principle I think most things are included there and anticipated, so welcome any feedback there. But thanks everyone. Anyone else wish to speak? Weedy, second.
You had the pain then.
So the two judge. Oh, yeah. Right. Nev, then Kirsten.
Just look, I want to reiterate everything that's been said there. Just a couple of things, really. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your chairmanship. I think it's been you've hurried us along while keeping it as best you could without upsetting anybody. And I think, honestly, I think it's probably some of the best chairmanship around a plan that I've seen for a while. And to my colleagues, I don't think we've ever agreed to disagree without at least one little session through our session of a hot under the collar, and we didn't even do that. And this is a 10-year plan. So thank you all for the cooperation of everybody. And I agree with Wendy. I think it's down to us, even though we grumble and moan, down to the briefings that we've had that made that happen.
Thanks, Nev. Kirsten? Right. I'll better make sure I continue to cheer it. So,
Good on you.
Kirsten.
Yes, as the councillor who's known for asking the most questions, it was absolutely excellent having the governance system. I thought that was brilliant. I could go through it really carefully and I had most of my questions answered, and then all I had to do was focus on the key ones that I hadn't quite got. So that sped things up an awful lot for me. It made it a lot clearer. I want to make special mention this year, because I've always given them a hard time, of the drainage unit. They did an excellent job this year. I didn't find a single mistake. So I just would love to pass that on to the drainage unit, because they've always had a bit of a hard time from that. So thank you very much to everyone for the excellent information presented. And I agree with Councillor Atkinson. It's been the simplest, the most straightforward, and haven't lost any sleep over this one. It's been very, very, it's kind of been fun to work as a team and to make sure that we're heading in the right direction.
Any further comments? Nikki? Oh, we? Nikki?
All I know. So, whatever you guys have been through in the past, let's not do that. Yeah, let's do this again.
Just like to say thank you, and just to write in reply, Jim, it's your last LTP with us. So thank you for helping us, and you promised you would, and thank you for helping us land this in a position that we can present to our community, and I think you can go out, you can held very high. This is given all we've been through, to present this to our community in the way, with the numbers that we're projecting, it's pretty respectable really, and as we've mentioned, prudent and responsible, particularly when we hear of the challenges other councils have got at keeping theirs down. I think this will land very well with our community. But we will hear very shortly. I don't want to preempt that too much, but Jim, thank you for your leadership through this. We've really appreciated it, and obviously you're with us for another month, but it's been a privilege to work with you through this period.
Quick right of reply, if I could.
Yes, go on.
Steal your right of reply. Can I say thanks, and thanks to you guys. It has been a pretty hard journey, and you have contributed to those workshops and helped shape a direction, and have stuck pretty well to it, and that's given us good guidance and confidence to be able to go away and say, well, that's what they want to see, how we're going to deliver that, and we've tried to do that to the best of our ability. So we've actually continue to work well as a team, and I think that's great. It certainly was one of my key objectives on retirement, is to ensure that we landed an LTP that we were comfortable with and was robust and gave you a good base, and hopefully for Jim Harland when he comes on board that continues on, and I'm sure it will. So thank you for your kind words to our staff. I really do appreciate the feedback and compliment you provide them when that's due. So much appreciated, and there's only just the hard work of turning that all into something that makes sense for our community, which the resource document you'll see there, any number that doesn't look right, there's graphs, they'll all need to be refreshed and redone and checked, but the sense of the words is what we're hoping. You're happy to receive your comments, so thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Well, at this point, I'll declare our meeting closed.
You have to put
I'm sorry.
You have to put your motion.
Okay, with that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, declare that carried. So, with that, I'll close our meeting and look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, if not before.